Hi, my name's Phil. I like to talk about politics. In this video, what I'd like to do is to discuss the government's stated intention in terms of dealing with the coronavirus and what it actually means from a scientific point of view. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news in politics, then please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. Even though this is sort of political in terms of why we're doing it this way, but what I want to do is focus on what the chief scientific advisor to the government has been saying. So first of all, we're in a situation, a few years ago they were saying, oh, we're sick of experts, according to the Brexiteers, because they didn't want experts telling us how bad Brexit was going to be. Coronavirus is a very, very different beast. And first of all, it's not their fault. But the way we deal with it is very important and very now. We have to deal with it now. We can't deal with it on our own terms. Like the timing of Brexit, we can sort of determine. The timing of this, we cannot. So the government seemed to be quite happy to be able to listen to a few experts. But who is an expert and who is not? For example, we've had people trotted out as scientific experts. And they are. But they need to be specifically experts in public health. So, for example, when someone was being interviewed who was an expert in psychology, they're not really the sort of person that needs, that tells us how to deal with a pandemic at all. They have no more expertise in that area than I do, even though they are much more expert in their field than I am in mine. So we need to be very, very careful about that as well. Are the people we're listening to experts in public health? And even though the chief scientific advisor I was talking about, who, Sir Patrick Vallance, is a medic, is a doctor, doesn't necessarily mean that he personally is an expert in this, although he is expert enough to be able to understand those other experts and pass it on. It's quite clear that in the UK we are taking a very, very different approach to most other countries. The only country we can say where we're doing anything like it is the United States. And of course, that doesn't fill us with confidence because just like in Britain, the United States has as head of government someone who, in his particular case, in Trump's case, just wants to get away with the blame. It's all about avoiding blame. He doesn't really care if a lot more people suffer than would need to. In Britain, it's a similar sort of thing. I talked about that in the Jaws reference from yesterday, so check that out if you haven't already. We are behind several other countries. Some countries have been hit badly by this, of course, relatively near us. Italy particularly badly. That allows us to look at what's happened there and learn from their successes and learn from their failures. And we, in theory, should be able to come up with the best possible plan. We are not following the same course as lots of other countries. Obviously, I'm not going to pronounce on that now. I've probably done it elsewhere anyway. Time will tell whether we're doing it the right way or not. Public health experts do not think we are. But we do have a strategy. The government has a strategy. It's a strategy that puts the economy first, that puts businesses first, that puts getting people out to work first. None of this self-isolation nonsense. But it is a strategy and it has a scientific basis. So, and I can sort of explain that a little bit. So, first of all, what was stated is there are several hundred cases at the moment. I say at the moment I'm doing this. When you watch it, maybe several hundred more. But there are hundreds of cases in Britain identified. You've got the coronavirus. However, it's believed that there will be many more. There'll be thousands more that actually have it. And we're not anywhere near the peak yet. The peak, we have not arrived at the peak yet. It's going to explode. That's all there is to it. In fact, the government strategy is to sort of allow it, to encourage it. I'll come on to that. So there are many more people that have it. And again, we'll need to try and remember that although this thing is very, very serious, there are a lot of people taking one extreme or another view instead of a balanced view. So there are some people who are in blind panic because of this thing. We have to remember the vast majority of us are not at serious risk of serious illness as a result of it. We'll get something, if we get it at all, which most of us are likely to, that is very like flu. And, many of us, I'm sure, have had flu before. I've had flu before and it's been really bad. And I've had flu before and it's been, I can't get into work, but, well, you wouldn't get into work anyway, just pass it on to others. But, you feel a bit rough. If I was to get at the same, sort of standard, the same level of severity as when I get a viral condition in general, I'll still be able to do this. I'll have to dose myself up on the old hot lemon before I do a video, but I'll still be able to do it. And that'll be the case for most people. If your immune system's strong, that'll be the case for most people. What they say is the way it works is you'll have about 5 days of like feeling like you've got a virus. And then there's a secondary phase when your immune system is going to have that battle. And if you're vulnerable, that's when it becomes very serious. For the rest of us, that's when we beat it. That's how it's going to work. So what is the government's strategy for this? It is, first of all, to reduce the size of the peak, but to broaden it. Now, there's a couple of thinkings about this. The main one is, at the moment, of course, the NHS is they all know it's knackered. They'll try and say, the government will try and say that the NHS is going to get everything it needs. I mean, at this point in time, even if we had a really good government, there's minimal amounts they can do after 10 years of abuse of the NHS and underfunding. You can't just magic it over. You can't sign a document that suddenly gives the NHS everything it needs right now. So they're trying to push the peak into summer so that we less pressure on the NHS, because they know that, again, the cases are going to absolutely explode. The other strategy here is trying to develop herd immunity. Now, you'll of course heard of the term herd immunity when we talk about, for example, the MMR vaccine. You need if you are foolish enough not to vaccinate your kids, you may get away with it if the rest of the population do. Because at the end of the day, if the rest of the population is immune to this thing, they're not going to pass it on to your kid who has no immunity to it. But once you reduce that, and that has happened in this country, and it's happened in the States as well, and some other countries where these anti-vaxxers have got their way to a certain extent, you drop that level below the critical value needed for herd immunity to be effective, and then you get people developing measles and so on, which has happened in this country. So herd immunity, the idea is, let the population be infected. We need the population to be infected. We know that the vast majority of the population are not going to suffer serious illness as a result of it. Let them get affected. Their immune system fights it. They are then immune. That means they're also not going to pass it on to others later on as well. Get that herd immunity into the population and we've beaten it. That is the theory. Is it sound from a scientific point of view? Couple of things. First of all, what they are saying is that we need the majority of the population to get it, but protect the vulnerable. That is, of course, crucial. We can't just, if we just, say don't take any precautions other than wash the normal stuff you should do anyway, whether there was a pandemic or not, of course, normal hygiene. But, go out into the world, do whatever, and lots of public gatherings and get the whole country infected. It'll sweep through and then it'll be finished fairly quickly. That's how nature works. The rest of the population, the surviving population, will catch it and be fine. But what about the people who will not? These are people's lives. We can't just say, because that's the other extreme people take, it's only the elderly and those with underlying conditions that are at risk. As if they don't matter. They do matter. They all matter. So how do you protect the vulnerable? And that's what the government are not saying at the moment. That's the problem. Herd immunity requires a lot of the vast majority of the population to get this thing and become immune. Herd immunity requires a massive number. The whole population, the vast majority of it. So you're allowing it. The strategy is to say, look, you're going to get it, but protect the vulnerable. And that is crucial. From a scientific point of view, it's not a ridiculous strategy if you can protect the people who are vulnerable to it. Although the problem is that even with this, because you can't correctly identify all the vulnerable people, you are still telling people that they're going to die because of the approach you've taken. Yes, even if we took all the approaches that other countries have been taking, some people still would. But at least the government would have been fighting to protect their lives. Our government is not. There is no aim at protecting it. And my concern as well, although the chief scientific advisor was saying about you need to protect the vulnerable, and you don't want to self-isolate too early, because he was saying, self-isolate too early, and then when we need to do it, which is not now, then your kids are bored, everyone's bored, and what happens is, you send them off to the grandparents. That's when they're at highest risk. And that all makes sense. Everything he said has made sense. The problem in my head is they're not saying how they intend to protect the vulnerable. So it comes down to this for me. The government are taking a line that is not necessarily considered the best line to take for protecting people. It's the best line to take for protecting the economy. And this idea of letting it spread through the population, develop the herd immunity, will only work from a moral point of view if you can protect those who are at least known to be vulnerable. You're still abandoning those who may, although we say if I got coronavirus, maybe I've already got it, but if I got coronavirus, I would be confident I'll get through it. I don't know that. I can't be certain of that. I believe I will because I'm never usually laid low by viral conditions. The last time I had flu that really properly laid me low was a long time ago. It was, nearly 20 years ago. I've had viruses since then. I've had flu since then. But it's made me feel a bit crap. So I'm confident, but I may be wrong. But those who are they're vulnerable. You'd be really worried if they caught it. What is the government's plan to make sure that they do not get infected by this strategy of actually let it go forth and multiply? So that's the government strategy, such as it is. Obviously, time will tell just how damaging or just how genius it is. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found the video interesting, please click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, then please also click the Patreon link, particularly important with videos like this because this ain't getting monetized. And until next time, I'll see you later.